Welcome to Inside Athletic Training, a podcast from the Professional Baseball Athletic Trainers Society, where Major League and Minor League athletic trainers share insight into athletic training at the highest level. This week on Inside Athletic Training, we sat down with Jeff Desjardins, Assistant Athletic Trainer for the Cleveland Guardians. Enjoy the show. Jeff, welcome to Inside Athletic Training. We're thrilled to have you on the show. To get things going here, I'd like to ask if you can share some information with our listeners about the Professional Baseball Athletic Trainer Society, also known as PBATS, and what the society means to you.
Yeah, hey, Sam. Great to hear from you. Excited to be here. It's such an honor to be here today, representing both PBATS and the Cleveland Guardians. Yeah, I think for PBATS, for me, it represents a brotherhood of kind of selfless servants. I think it's a group of professionals, quiet professionals that care a great deal about moving the needle forward from a baseball sports medicine standpoint. PBATS was founded in the early 1980s, 1983, and it serves as an educational resource for both Major League and Minor League athletic trainers. So again, it's a really special group to be a part of.
Yeah, I know many of our guests, especially Tomas Vera, a couple of weeks ago mentioned, it's his brothers in baseball, and we hear that from a lot of you guys. So that's definitely an important factor for PBATS. So Jeff, you're currently an assistant athletic trainer with the Cleveland Guardians organization. You're also extremely passionate about the mental health and well-being of athletes in your care and athletic trainers, which we'll get into shortly. But first, I'd love to learn more about your background and what paths led you to where you are today. So for the listeners, can you share a little bit about where you're from? Maybe were you an athlete growing up that drove you into sports medicine? And also, where did you find your passion for athletic training?
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in Gorham, Maine. Ben Patanziano was on a few episodes back, and he resided from Maine as well, and or hailed from Maine. So grew up in a small town right outside of Portland, Maine. My dad was a baseball coach at a small Division III college in Maine, and I think just learned the love of the game from him, and he bestowed a strong work ethic in me and in my siblings. I think baseball, like I said, was my first true love, and again, enjoyed playing that as I was younger, and then as I worked up through high school baseball, Legion baseball, getting ready to try out in college. I think it was somewhat limited in how far I was going to get as far as baseball is concerned. So I used to work out with the players at St. Joseph's College in Windham, Maine, and and there were times where I'd spend time with the head athletic trainer, Peter Wheeler, at the time at St. Joe's, and it just seemed like a natural fit to me. He was just a great guy, really good friend of my father's, and and just conversations with him, and it just seemed like a natural progression. Maybe just my love for the game of baseball, but then also being able to help people and help players. So I wasn't exactly sure what my path was going to be, moving forward, but I talked to him. He went to Peter Wheeler attended Plymouth State College in Plymouth, New Hampshire. And, he spoke fondly of their athletic training program. So I decided to kind of follow in his footsteps and enrolled at Plymouth State and started in their athletic training program and fell in love with it. I think it's just who I was meant to be.
Yeah, that's really interesting. We hear from a lot of our guests that it's kind of, a combination of loving the game, wanting to work really hard at their craft, but also just kind of like a natural ability to want to get into it, which is very interesting. So once you get into athletic training as a professional, obviously the long road through the minor leagues and things like that. What is it like when you first break in through the minor leagues, but then also once you finally get your shot to get into Major League Baseball? Can you expand a bit on that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So when I was hired by the Cleveland Guardians, back in the day of 2001, I think at the time they were just looking for somebody that had a passion for the game and wanted to work hard, and I fit that bill. So I showed up and I asked a ton of questions at the right time. I just worked hard, and I started out in rookie ball in Burlington, North Carolina, and spent 9 years in the minor leagues before breaking into the major leagues. So I learned a lot through those experiences. I grew as a person, as a clinician. It was definitely a grind, but something that I embraced, and I honestly enjoyed, every step, every level of the way. So I spent 2 years in Burlington, North Carolina at a rookie ball level. And then I started in 2003 with the Lake County Captains in East Lake, Ohio. That was low long season A. And that was the first year of that ballpark. So it was kind of neat, being there for their inaugural season. And then I was promoted to High A in Kinston, North Carolina. And then I moved to Double A for 2 years in Akron, Ohio. And then our coordinator left to take a major league job with the Washington Nationals. So, I spoke to my boss and I said, hey, if you guys need a medical coordinator, athletic training coordinator, I'd love to fill that role in addition to my role as a traditional minor league athletic trainer. So I took on that role, and then I went to AAA for 2 seasons in Buffalo, New York. Then we changed affiliations and was able to open up another new ballpark in Columbus, Ohio in 2009. So 3 total years at the AAA level, and then I was promoted to the major league staff in 2010.
And a lot of our guests, Jeff, have said, how invaluable their time in the minor leagues was. Is that something you kind of agree with? Was it, a lot of people have said, this is where we learned how baseball worked and how athletic training as a profession worked. Do you kind of feel the same sentiment from your career?
Yes, absolutely. I think, I try to embrace, every level that I was at. And that was like my major league club. And, I was so fortunate to have some really good managers and pitching coaches and hitting coaches. And I learned so much about the game and how to be a professional and how to communicate effectively. And at the minor league level, you can take your lumps. You can, if you make a mistake, you can work through it, and you've got a little bit of leeway. And I think that, you learn how to navigate and avoid mistakes kind of as you go. Whereas just, getting a job at the major league level, it's so much more hyper-focused that there's just so many more things going on. And every decision means so much that, it's just different. So, yeah, I think you learn to kind of make do at the minor league level. A minor league athletic trainer wears many hats. So you learn so much about the business, and you meet some absolutely fabulous people along the way, I look back at the minor league years fondly, and it truly made me who I am today.
And is it hard to follow up on that? Is it difficult to really embrace every level throughout the minor leagues when ultimately, from what I understand, the majority of the men and women who get into the profession, they would like to spend time in the big leagues eventually. So when you're down there toiling through A ball, rookie ball, extended spring training, instructional league, is it difficult to really dive in and enjoy every minute of that, since ultimately you do want to, strive for bigger things?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, I talk about this often with our minor league athletic trainers. And I think that, it's important to embrace where you're at that time and just be the best version of yourself, and then control what you can control. Right. So, you're going to show up every day and you're going to give it your A game. You're going to, you're going to work harder than everybody else, and you respect everybody else, and you try to put the best product on the field. And I think that shows, and I think ultimately everybody wants to get to the major league level. It just, unfortunately, it doesn't happen for everybody, but I think you never shortchange the process. And I truly, I truly enjoyed every single level, that I was at, and I never put a time frame on it. I said, I really enjoyed what I was doing, and I enjoyed taking care of athletes, and whether it was, the rookie ball guys, or if there was a major league guy on rehab assignment, I think, I enjoyed taking care of people. And another thing that's kind of, that I heard that was interesting to me early on in my career, John Farrell was our farm director, and went on to work for the Toronto Blue Jays and Boston Red Sox. He spoke to all the minor league staff and players at the outset of spring training, and he said, our goal here is to get everybody to the major leagues. Staff member, player, it doesn't matter. He said, but unfortunately, not all of you will get to the major leagues with us. So every time you step on the field, whether it's you're a coach, you're a manager, you're an athlete trainer, you're a baseball player, you always want to put your best foot forward and sell yourself and do it the right way, So, and each day I went to work, I never forgot that. I was like, I'm here, it's almost like a kind of a job interview, just being out there, just being, doing the best you can for guys, and you never know, who might notice you, and I think, looking where I'm at now to where I was 20 years ago, this is such a small fraternity, and if people show up to work hard, intelligent clinicians, with a ton of energy and some character, I think those are the folks that move, maybe a little more quickly and get opportunities, and usually, if we have interns, minor league athletic trainers, other athletic trainers call and say, okay, hey, I need something, who do you have, and if you show up every day and you work hard, and you're reliable, I mean, those are the names that get passed on, and those are the guys and girls that get promoted.
Yeah, and that's such a great attitude that you mentioned, to not put a time frame and pressure on yourself as you're coming up in the minor leagues. We haven't really heard anyone explain it that way, but really a great mindset for anyone working through the minor leagues or through the ranks of any job. That's truly important. And Jeff, you mentioned a bit earlier about working with a ton of great managers and coaches who taught you a lot about the game of baseball. But in the training room specifically, who were some of those role models in sports medicine who you looked up to?
Being from Maine, Kevin Rand, I have the utmost respect for him. He's a long-time Detroit Tigers health trainer and director of medical services. I think he had a great way about him. Gene Monahan, Steve Downey, those guys have been around forever, and they've won. And Jim Rowe, I spoke to him before I was hired by the Cleveland Guardians. Jim Rowe was a long-time head of the trainer of the Boston Red Sox. And he gave me some incredible advice. We had some candid conversations before, I was hired by the Guardians back in the day, and those guys were absolutely phenomenal. And I think, Paul Spicuzza, Jimmy Warfield, I'd be remiss not to mention those guys, and had the opportunity to spring training anyways, to work side by side with Jimmy Warfield, and he was a legend in the field, and Paul Spicuzza, just a phenomenal, human being, and just a great athletic trainer, and they held the reins with the Indians Guardians for years, and I think Lonnie Soloff, our director of medical services now, he came on board, I think it was 2003, and he just had a different mindset, and he just had a different approach, a collegial approach, kind of servant leadership approach. He is or was and still is a really incredible listener. And I think he kind of brought our program together. So our spring training facility used to be in Winter Haven, Florida, and the minor league complex was separated by maybe about 100 yards from the major league complex. And it seemed farther than that, and the minor league system was kind of run differently than the major league system from a medical standpoint. And Lonnie came and kind of shored that up. He brought everybody together. Everybody was working under one roof. That there was a strong level of communication. We changed our programming, so the programming was the same from rookie ball to the major league. So if a player was called up from high A to double A to triple A, or from double A to the big leagues, programming was the same, so it was a little more comfortable for the athlete. They weren't seeing something completely foreign, completely different. So, Lonnie's approach, is just incredible. And he's probably had, the most profound impact on me in how to, how to be a professional clinician, but then also just how to be a good leader and how to be a good follower too, So, we've had a number of conversations just over the years. So I'd say those gentlemen there.
And Jeff, you talked earlier about working hard, putting your head down, doing your job with great character. On that same note, is there any advice that you would give to college students or potential interns who are looking to get into athletic training in professional baseball, whether that's a skill set or a personality trait or just their work ethic? What advice would you have for students and younger professionals?
Yeah, I think be persistent. You're going to have to work hard. And before I started working for the Guardians, I talked to some folks that were involved in minor league baseball, and to the person, each one said, you guys just work crazy hours, and long days, and there's one gentleman I respected back, that I used to work with a number of years ago, and he said, you're afraid of a little hard work, and I was never afraid of a little hard work. So I think you have to be committed, right? You have to be committed. You have to want to work hard and be inquisitive and ask questions at the right time. I think to be successful kind of in a locker room and athletic training room is know when to speak and ask the question and know when to just listen, and just watch, and learn. And I think, if you're new in an environment, I think, just kind of watching what takes place, see, how relationships develop and see how people communicate, just watch and learn. I think that is an important skill to have or to practice. I think so many people, hop into, somewhere new, they're super eager and they're trying to prove themselves and show their worth and show how much they know. But I think, knowing when to engage, knowing when to kind of just sit back and watch, listen, and allow things to happen organically, I think that's really, really important.
Yeah, we know that, a lot of our guests have mentioned the ability to listen is extremely important in athletic training in every profession as you jump into it. So that's interesting to hear you say the same. Shifting gears a bit, we get a lot of questions from listeners about what's the day-to-day of an athletic trainer in Major League Baseball for a 162-game season, which is absolutely grueling. But before we jump into that, we all know it's spring training time. Everybody's out in Arizona and Florida, physicals, working through testing and getting all of that information and data for the season. I'd love to know, and our listeners would as well, what is the day-to-day of an athletic trainer in the big leagues like at spring training?
Yeah, so this is probably, for me personally, the most difficult time of the year. Just there's so much going on, and there's so many more athletes you're working with. So, you've got, 65, maybe 70 guys in camp. And, during the season, you have your 25, 26 guys that you're focused on. And, we take an aggressive approach at, teaching our guys healthy habits early, right? So the majority of guys either are going to be at the major league level or maybe AAA and AA. So we're trying to establish relationships, trying to teach these guys healthy habits early so that they can sustain, good health throughout the course of the year. So that all starts here. So, we push hydration early, and again, guys coming, the trainer, we're a little more progressive. We try to get everybody in the athletic training room and we work them through our physical process. And again, from day one, we're educating these guys. Hey, look, you know what? This is a grind right now. We're working you through this physical process, but, with this information that we're obtaining right now, we can sit down and have a thoughtful conversation with you on maybe how to tweak your program or just how to supplement what you're doing now to be the best version of yourself. So I think whether you're in spring training or during the regular season, our goal is to put the best product on the field every single day. So if a player comes in from a mental health standpoint, from a physical standpoint, if they're at 80%, we're trying to get him to 85, 92%, let's say. If a guy comes in at 95%, we're just trying to get him 96, 97%, and we're taking a multifaceted approach at trying to impact these guys and put the best product on the field every single day to give us a chance to win. So that's exciting, right? So like you're building the foundation here at spring. So, I mean, this is, I think my 14th spring at the major league level, and it's a very similar approach every year. I mean, it's so exciting. It's a new beginning. You wonder, how things are going to progress throughout the season. But again, it's like, if you're in the trenches right now, establishing relationships, building that trust, which is so important, and really trying to impact these guys, and get to know them a little bit and let them get to know you and just kind of bring in the energy every single day.
Yeah, and that's a perfect kind of segue into what we're going to get into next here. Clearly spring training is so important, ultimately laying the foundation that leads you to getting on the field healthy for the regular season. But when it comes to athletic training, a lot of people out there may think that, Jeff and Lonnie and James and the staff members, they may show up and have a front row seat in the dugout for a game and get there a couple hours before, but clearly we know there's so much more to it than that. So to start, I'd love to know more about the athletic trainer's relationship with players. Like you said, there's so much trust needed there. But what is it like, going through the journey of a 162 game season with these guys?
Yeah, great question. I think, and I'll just back up a little bit. At the minor league level, it's a little different than the major league level. At the minor league level, at the lowest levels, it's almost like you're just a parent. You're second or third parent where, some of these kids first time away from home. Latin American players, it's their first time in another country. They might be sending all their meal money back home, and they're trying to save money, just living off of our supplements in the training room, and so again, it's all about education and just being just a steady presence. You never get too high, you never get too low, and just help support them and just kind of allow the relationship to happen organically. So. And sometimes it's hard, sometimes it's really hard. And sometimes maybe you don't connect with somebody as well. But I think, those are the folks that you really kind of double down on and really try to work to get to know that person and help them out. Now, at the major league level, I think, we have a robust staff. You mentioned Lonnie and James and we have Chad Wolf here and our massage therapist, Beth Mignano, and a physical therapist, Adam Kimberly. So it's we have a group of clinicians that are a cohesive group that all interface with the players in different ways, so some players may gravitate to certain staff members, and that's okay. Because I think as long as we're able to get that message to players and get what we need that player to do, make sure that gets done and gets accomplished. I think that's kind of where we end up landing, So it's been a successful approach for us. But it's, as far as communication, it's being in the athlete trainer room is just awesome. I think it's a natural fit for me. I think we try to bring the energy every day, keep it positive, keep it light, just because these guys oftentimes, the game is based on failure, right? So, these guys just see so much failure all the time, and they're critiqued and criticized by everyone. With social media and cell phones, as soon as the game's over, they're in the training room, looking at their phone, and they've got all this negative social media potentially that they're reading, and so it's kind of bringing them back to the present and just in the moment, and just having real conversations with them, I think that's kind of our approach. My approach is to be as authentic as you can be, to be as well balanced and just steady all the time.
Yeah, we've heard from many athletic trainers on the show that authenticity is absolutely key. People want to work with somebody who they can trust to be themselves around. And one of the other, I think the most glamorous and exciting parts of your job is you're really one of the only non-coaches or players in the dugout for every single Major League Baseball game, which is really awesome. And on that note, I'd love to learn more about how athletic trainers, specifically with the Guardians, manage those relationships with the coaches and managers outside of the players.
Yeah, that's another great question. And our staff, they make it easy. Terry Francona, Tito. I mean, I'm obviously biased, but he's just the nicest guy you're ever going to work with, and he keeps it light. And even in high pressure situations, he just finds a way to say something or just just kind of break the stress a little bit, and he treats everybody, from the bat boy to the owner of the team just the same way. He's just a quality human being. So he makes it easy, and his staff, again, it's the same way. I mean, it's honestly, it's like we spend so much time with these guys. It's like they're brothers, and they share certain things that tough moments in their personal lives or professional lives, and some of the guys have been around a while. It's fantastic to sit around and just listen to the stories, and how things happen in the 70s and 80s and 90s, So it's a really cool fraternity, and it's truly like any other sports team anybody's been on. I think it's just a good group of guys and people. It's just kind of a natural fit, and it's just here anyways. It's been absolutely fabulous.
And Jeff, obviously you guys have a large staff in Cleveland. We mentioned the names of the clinicians over there who do awesome work. Being an assistant athletic trainer might be much different than, for example, Lonnie's position. Is there still a relationship in your position with the front office, or does that kind of roll up to Lonnie and he communicates that way?
Yeah, I think anything that needs to be articulated from like a game day injury management standpoint, probably 90% of the time, it's probably going through James Quinlan, our head athletic trainer. But again, there are times where, front office members, they'll come down and they'll ask you, point blank, hey, what do you got on this guy? And it's important that again, you be authentic and you tell them, the truth, give them your thoughts. And then, you follow up with the head athletic trainer and maybe the director after to say, look, we had this conversation and just so you're aware, this is what I said, just in case there's, any kind of differing of opinions or anything like that. But again, our group here, from back in the day, Mark Shapiro was down in Toronto, and Chris Antonetti and Mike Chernoff. These guys are just absolutely just incredible human beings. Like they're just unbelievable human beings and care so much for the staff and the players. They're present. They're incredible listeners. They go out of their way to touch base with everybody in spring training and during the season. It's truly like kind of one big family here, and it's just a very comfortable setting to be in.
Yeah, that we've really heard the same sentiment from a lot of the athletic trainers we've interviewed, that, the family is important. And this is your family that you're with for 162 games through, basically the entire year outside of a couple months. So that's hugely important. Shifting gears a bit to more specifics about the athletic training profession here. We know the products and innovations in the field of athletic training have really been incredible when it comes to helping you all take care of the athletes within your organization. How important is it that you guys keep up with the innovations and evolve as athletic trainers in sports medicine as each year goes on?
Yeah, it's really important, and I think it's a game changer for us. And I think, we all kind of keep our pulse on what's going on, across the profession and then through different in other professional sports. And each year we get together in Cleveland, our major league staff and our minor league staff, medical staff get together, kind of hot wash the previous year, plan forward, and we take part in some sort of continuing education, whether that be like a Mulligan mobilization technique, ART, functional movement screening, just a number of different types of different ways to take care of athletes. And we try to just keep adding to that toolbox each year. We try to get better. And then, we just want to be able to offer, our athletes everything that they could get anywhere else plus some, even if it doesn't work for us, maybe at least have a better working, knowledge, better understanding of what that particular technique might be about. So, we push the envelope, and we try to vet everything as well. There's a lot of white noise out there. We try to, clear that and just try to take part in meaningful activity just because our time is so limited. So I think, out of a 162 game schedule, and it is a grind with all the travel, essentially we're just trying to get guys back to homeostasis, get back to baseline. So that's our goal every day. It's just, assess where they're at, and then do everything in our power to try to get them back up to baseline or even a little better before they go out and take the field each night. So, we're really pushing the envelope. I feel like, we have some really cool techniques and at the minor league level, it's interesting. We have our team physicians come down to spring and we have our, the physicians for our minor league affiliates come down. So, we've got these healthcare providers from all over the country that come in and we're under one roof and, we're spending a lot of time together, so just, conversations take place organically, and we work through, different techniques and I think it truly impacts our guys. So I think, at the end of the day, it's about, there are a lot of bells and whistles out there, but I think it's about the clinician being able to identify, what the athlete has going on, put a thoughtful program together or provide some thoughtful recommendations and, to the player. And then the player trusting the clinician enough to agree to perform, the kind of the exercise prescription or the treatment program, and then move forward. And typically, once guys start feeling better after you start working with them, and then they obviously that trust builds and increases, and then you have a really strong working relationship throughout the course of the season and the course of the year.
And speaking of providing the top level care and really knowing what's going on with your athletes, I'd love to hear more about the mental health aspect, which I know you and your staff with the Guardians and the entire organization and Major League Baseball as well are very passionate about. So I'd like to start by asking what attracted you to kind of learning more about the mental health of professional athletes and its importance?
Yeah, Sam, that's a great question. And, mental health issues, they've been seeing us for years. And again, we've probably seen them, maybe not, really recognize them or I didn't really know how to maybe to handle some of the cases. And, we always refer on but there's just guys, there were so many guys, that I interfaced with that were limited, or were, maybe their careers were cut short because of mental health issues. So, I think under the mental health umbrella, you have maladaptive behavior, but then there's also performance psychology as well, and performance psychology specifically works on athletes' confidence, their attitude. You can work through imagery and visualization, work on their concentration and focus, and there's, self-talk, relaxation, overcoming adversity, which happens a lot in baseball, goals and commitments, routines, how to deal with stress, mindfulness, working with meditation, dealing with anxiety and emotional management. Like there's so many things out there to help these guys, and I think that, it's really starting to take off, probably in the last, 10 years or so, but it's just, these guys deal with just, so much failure and they're criticized constantly, and it's a constant grind for these guys. I just, I don't know. I just felt like, I needed to learn more. So I got a master's degree in performance psychology, again, just to help me be able to help these guys a little more. And like I said, if a guy comes in and he's at 85%, just because he's been having a tough go or there's stuff going on at home, is there a way I can help them out? And again, if I can help them out and help the organization out. Yeah, I went back and got a master's degree in performance psychology. And I think, I think it's helped me. It's helped our organization and the group that we work with. And then last year we worked with a mental health first aid group just to train our medical staff, to train our strength coaches, and then we ended up training I'm pretty sure our minor league entire minor league coaching staff, at least some managers for sure, athlete trainers, strength coaches. And again, that whole approach was put in play. Just if somebody's having a hard time, we're trying to destigmatize mental health and really encourage our guys, push our guys to seek help. Dr. Charlie Marr, he's been a team psychologist for years. He's still heavily involved with us, and then Lindsay Shaw is our team psychologist now. She's from she worked with the Olympics for a while, but the organization is definitely buying all in on this, and we're really trying to make a difference and an impact on our players and staff.
And we know Major League Baseball, on that note, and John Coyles and his team up there have done a really good job of educating players, staff members, sports medicine professionals about mental health. Also, players aren't just afraid to share how they're feeling. Have you guys seen a shift in the clubhouse with more players being open to seeking help from not only you and your athletic training staff, but also from Lindsay Shaw and her team?
Yeah, I think so. I think it all comes down to trust, and I think that when we've identified, when there are serious issues, those cases are definitely referred on to the appropriate, through the appropriate channels and into the right personnel. It's kind of like it's the one-offs where you're not sure, and trying to work through kind of where somebody's at. And I think that comes down to trust. And I think that, that has to happen organically. So hopefully, again, with a mental health first aid and people trained up appropriately, just to be able to recognize if there's something going on and then working through the appropriate channels to get these guys help, or, to get their spouses help, we engage with our wives group and if they're having a hard time at home, or, if their husbands are going through a rough spell and they need some help, because this game is challenging. It's really, really hard. It's hard on families. It's hard on all of us as staff members. But I think recognizing that there are issues, there are real issues, and then having the appropriate steps in place. It's just like I said before, it destigmatizes mental health as being a bad thing, and I think our organization really, really embraces that, and I think we're helping people.
Yeah, that's all really interesting, Jeff, and clearly trust and family is so important to the athletic training profession. And it sounds like your team in Cleveland is just doing an awesome job. So kudos to you guys for all that work. Jeff, thanks so much for joining the show. These stories and insights have been awesome. To wrap up today's episode, we're going to finish with a quick Q&A segment that we call Extra Bases here on the show. Okay. So I'm going to start by asking you 4 quick questions for you to share some insight into your favorite things about athletic training. So we'll go ahead and start at first base. What is your favorite athletic training room to work in the big leagues?
Well, I'm going to be biased here. Cleveland, our home athletic training room is just awesome. It's a big space. It feels like home. I mean, it's definitely my home away from home. I probably spend more time there than I do at my house, honestly. But, Cleveland's great. I think the guys down in Tampa, those guys do a fabulous job out there. They take such pride in their clubhouse and their training room. I think those guys do a good job too, but definitely Cleveland.
That's good to hear. I know a lot of people have mentioned Atlanta being a great training room, but also it's good to hear Tampa's doing a great job as well. Moving on to second base here. What is your favorite major league stadium to watch a game from the dugout?
I like Minnesota and I like Seattle as well. Seattle's a really cool ballpark. Minnesota, it's a small ballpark, but it's kind of cool. It's just the fans are, just get the family unit into, as grandfather, father, son. And they're pretty nice up there too. The fans seem to be pretty decent, but probably Minnesota and Seattle.
Yeah, Minnesota's a great ballpark. It really feels like you're in the middle of the city, kind of sunken down a bit. And Seattle is always an awesome place to go. Moving on to third base, what is your favorite city to visit on the road, whether that's going out to eat, seeing live music, or doing something else?
I like Chicago a lot. Chicago's just a great place to visit. We stay right downtown on the Magnificent Mile, and there are just an incredible amount of restaurants, and it's just a cool city. I like Chicago.
That definitely seems to be the leader in the clubhouse. I think Tomas and a few other the PBATS members we interviewed mentioned Chicago, and it's probably because you guys aren't going there in the winter. That's for sure. But moving on to home plate here. Did you have a welcome to the big leagues moment at some point during one of the first few years as a Major League Baseball athletic trainer?
Yeah, I think maybe my first year, we broke camp, just really excited to be on the Major League flight, with the team. And we opened up in Kansas City, and so, I was really, really excited. And, they introduced you out on the third baseline, and, we were sitting there, and, they played the national anthem, and then there's a big old B-2 stealth bomber that flew over the enormous scoreboard at Kauffman Stadium in center field. That was just, talking about goosebumps. That was just a really cool moment, and I'll never forget that.
Yeah, that's amazing, and clearly well-deserved after, working your way up through the minor leagues. Well, Jeff, thanks so much for joining the show. We really appreciate your time and your dedication to PBATS and the profession of athletic training. And we wish you and your staff best luck throughout the upcoming season.
Hey, thanks, Sam. And like I said, it's a huge honor to represent PBATS and the Cleveland Guardians. I just feel so fortunate to be where I'm at now. And when I was in college, I used to get the Gatorade and PBATS newsletter, and I couldn't wait to receive that and just read about, what the Major League Athletic trainers were doing and to be part of that, it's a humbling experience, but again, just really proud and excited to help out any way I can.
And that wraps up this episode. Thank you for listening to Inside Athletic Training, a podcast from the Professional Baseball Athletic Trainers Society, a show for athletic training students, educators, and professionals who want to learn more about life as an athletic trainer in major and minor league baseball. If you've enjoyed the show, head over to pbats.com to gain access to other free resources. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. Until next time, thanks again for listening.